Welcome. We're joined again by political analyst and CivilNet host Eric Hagopian. Eric, welcome back.
It's a pleasure.
So there have been numerous examples of disinformation and misinformation circulating around the Armenian community. A good example would be that there were those claiming that the Armenian government was planning to dissolve the Artsakh Defense Army and that large swathes of the region of Syunik will be handed over to Azerbaijan. Can you speak a bit on these campaigns and who do you think is behind these campaigns?
Well, I mean, obviously the people who are behind it are some combination of the current, what passes for the opposition or the street opposition, and some forces directly tied to the old regime. The primary person behind most of these things is Mikhail Minassian, who is Serge Sarkisyan's son-in-law, who actually controls and owns a good swath of media in Armenia. But I mean, the purpose of these things is to cause confusion and disempower people. Because, you know, conspiracies at the end of the day serve multiple purposes, these kinds of things that are put out there. One is that they are, for the purposes of the average citizen, you know, they sort of get them off the hook. What should I do anything? Why should I do anything? Why should I be active? Why should I join a citizens organization? Why should I start a citizens organization if everything in the world is a plot or a conspiracy and that's decided on a weekly conference call between powerful people? And for the purposes of people in power, that disempowerment is very advantageous because if people think they don't have agency and you represent a small group of people that have no popularity, the way for you to come back to power is to cause enough confusion and to cause enough dissension that people are disempowered. You know, the purpose of modern propaganda in many ways is not like the 20th century where you rile people up to go do things. You actually try to disengage them from being involved in the political process or the social process. Because that's the only way that a small group of unpopular elites can take back control of the country.
And what is the difference between misinformation and disinformation, and how do these news stories or whatever move from obscure postings perhaps on social media to mainstream news sources?
Well, I mean, we have to be very careful because everybody who puts up something that is absurd or ridiculous on social media is not part of some plot or conspiracy by the elites, because that's true. That's generally not true in 99% of the cases. If you're an average person that doesn't know too much and you see something and you post it, you're simply a tool in their process, but you're not deliberately doing something. That's misinformation, or you don't know any better, and you post something that sounds true or sounds interesting. Disinformation is the organized systems behind it. And these systems are quite deliberate and they act in very specific ways. And what they do is, since there are legitimate news sources or sources that sound legitimate with serious news and they can't make something up or put something ridiculous, there's a system in which things start in social media in what are called mushroom sites, especially on Telegram, which is the sort of Russian version of Facebook, in which there's a mushroom site for 2 or 3 days that looks like a normal news site, and they'll put something utterly absurd there. I'll give you a recent example. Was a news story on a mushroom site that when the chief of staff of the army met with the president, he presented him with 2 hours worth of evidence of treason and treachery by the prime minister, without providing any evidence for this conversation or confirmation by the chief of staff or the president. And then this story, which is entirely made up, it gets picked up by a normal news site that sources this mushroom site as the source of this thing. So they're not to blame for this thing, even though nobody knows who owns this mushroom site. So the most outrageous things are said, are created on these mushroom sites or social media blog postings. And from there, they're picked up by what looks like normal press sources and disseminated. And by the time it gets to the 4th or 5th person sharing it, becomes something much, much bigger than it really is. So these are systematic approaches. This is not something that happens by happenstance. But 99% of people that are actually engaged in spreading these things are just ordinary people that don't know any better, or don't have the time to check every fact, or look for things that sound like what they believe in, and they spread it, and this is how these systems of propaganda work.
And of course, in many circles, individuals like Mikhail Minassian or Mishik, who many will recognize from videos he posts on social media from a kitchen, many consider him discredited due to many allegations of embezzlement. There has been the Zorahek case, the radio CJSC case, many dodgy privatization schemes, which altogether amount to millions possibly. So who is Minassian, and why is he so central to understanding the Armenian information war?
Well, because he owns so many of the media sources. Some of the most common media sources that people go to, I've gone to, we have all gone to, are actually owned by him. Most of the TV channels, especially the ones focused on the diaspora, that most diaspora people see, are owned by him. For all practical purposes, he is the leader of the opposition, frankly, because and he's by far the smartest of them, because he's far brighter in his understanding of modern technology and how to use it. So how he's relevant is he's sort of the man behind the scenes, because what goes on in the street, the current opposition, left to its own devices, cannot do anything. But what his media sources do is to take a 200-person demonstration and make it look like the country is in turmoil. He can take something that's a 2,000-person demonstration and make it look like it's 100,000 people. So media is the primary focus of the opposition to the current government. It's actually not what's on the street. If you go to, for example, the demonstrations in Armenian, nightly there's probably 1,000 or 2,000 people that gather there, but most of the people who live in those tents are staying there. It's 200 people and 30 members of the media. So you have this massive media source covering very small numbers of people and exaggerating it. So in many ways, for all practical purposes, the opposition is a media one, and it's controlled primarily by this one person that's directly tied to the old regime.
And how can people differentiate between news sources that are reliable and accurate and those which are not?
First and foremost, you need to question everything. You need to question everybody. You need to question me. You need to question our channel. Don't take anything on face value until you can think about it, or preferably look into it. So what is necessary is an educated, media-educated population here and in the diaspora. People who do not take the most basic things and spread it, but you use your basic logic. One of the most common things that have been going on in social media here is that there's a plan to destroy the genocide monument and to replace it with someone's statue. Well, how much sense does that make? Who would that serve? So why are you reposting that when you know it's utterly ridiculous and has no basis of reality? So the way to fight this is to educate yourself and to question everything and see if it actually makes sense, and not be a passive news source user, but be an active news source user to the extent that you can. Obviously, ordinary people can't sit 5 hours looking at the news sources. But if something sounds absurd, and what is it that sounds absurd? If something is said that really doesn't serve anyone's purposes, it's probably not true. So you just need to be a critical news user and question everyone and everyone's motivations. And then you make your decisions based on that.
And many have noted that there really has been a rise in these misinformation and disinformation campaigns. Why have these forces of Armenian politics invested so much in these campaigns? You've spoken a bit about what is the desired effect, but do you think it is having that desired effect?
Well, I think it's having its desired effect in the fact that it is causing massive confusion and massive chaos, and sort of bringing down the morale of the country. That it definitely has had that effect, because it causes so much confusion that no one knows what's true anymore. Has it had a practical effect in politics as far as the forces in the country? No, because the life experience of people on a daily basis overrides these systems of propaganda, because no matter how effective or well-run these propaganda systems are, you cannot convince people that the country wasn't raped and looted for 25 years, because that contradicts people's life experiences. However, where these systems of propaganda have been exceptionally successful is in the diaspora, because that everyday life filter of Armenia doesn't exist. So you live in this vacuum and you constantly see one ridiculous, absurd thing after another. So they have actually driven our diaspora crazy, especially in places where these medias are very prominent, like Southern California. They've gone the most crazy. I get the most idiotic things from Southern California, where these media sources are the strongest. So no, they have not had a practical effect on the power relationships about who's popular and who's not. But have they caused confusion and done damage to the country? Most certainly, and that's been the purpose of it. The purpose is to disempower citizens, to turn citizens into subjects, into people thinking that they have no rights or agency in their lives. This is the purpose. It's like inverted totalitarianism. The object is to make people think that they can't make a difference. So a small group of people can actually take back power, because what difference does it make what I do if that's not how things work?
Do you think these campaigns also kind of go hand in hand with an attempt to discredit the reputable Armenian media organizations? We saw, for example, the Azadutun TV reporter that was heckled and bellowed at the opposition protest.
Of course. If there are systems of power, there are systems that are inclined to cause confusion, and there are any systems that are getting in the way of this disempowering confusion tactics, you're going to be attacked. In fact, if you're not being attacked, if you're not being called names, you're not doing your job right, because you're not being effective. And in fact, what I've learned is the more you clarify things, the more you fight the confusion or the deliberate disinformation campaigns, the bigger of a target that you become. You should take that as a point of pride.
And finally, do you think Armenians have a particular propensity to take interest almost in conspiracy theories?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, first of all, that's true. Conspiracy theories and that kind of thinking is base human instinct. It has nothing to do with Armenian, Russian, whatever, or American. It's just, there's not a group of people that is not susceptible to something like this, except the tools change. That's basic human nature. Gossip. I mean, one part of what works about conspiracy theories is that it makes you seem smarter than other people. I know something that you don't. But in our culture, we like to not take responsibility for our situation. And if you don't want to take responsibility for your situation or the state of the country or what happened, for example, in the war last year, you come up with some massive conspiracies that involve 17 people that are so powerful that you're just a pawn in their game. So it's attractive. It's attractive for everyone. And it's something that needs to be fought in the sense that you need to fight it in yourself. That you should not use nonsense like this as an excuse for you not to take your responsibility seriously. The most important thing is for us to look at ourselves critically and demand more of ourselves rather than blame anybody else, even though there's plenty of other blame to go around.
Well, Eric, a pleasure as always. And thank you for joining us on CivilNet.